I even pressed the record button, I probably should have gone through with you of do we like this background or
I do. I meant to compliment you on that. I really like that background. It's our people.
I saved a few images where I was like, okay, we have some different options, but you know, I was kind of looking at different ones. I was like, is this high quality enough? And then also I was trying to figure out, do we want something that maybe changes when we get further into the season? But yeah, figured we would showcase our main quad of
yes. I love them. I love them so much. I can't wait till we can talk more about Han-seo. Like, I love him so much.
Don't send me spiraling. I think I can keep it together a little bit better in this chat because he's not as active in the first 5 episodes. So I should probably give an actual introduction to what we're doing. Hi to everyone watching. So Christina is back. For those of you who regularly watch, we're going to talk about Vincenzo, which we said we were going to do for anyone who keeps up with our recurring video chats. Usually we're talking about Shadow and Bone, but of course you're under lock and key of saying absolutely nothing about the ongoings related to season 2. I could try to, you know, throw in something that I could use for clickbait, but like literally who cares? We have 8,000 hours of content to talk about because we're doing Vincenzo episodes and the show is so long. So for anyone who's wondering, the bit of backstory is that you just randomly were telling me, you know, privately, oh, you need to watch Vincenzo. And I'm not super active in watching Korean dramas, so I didn't really have a point of reference to compare it to. So I just kind of started watching it. And if you had not been so insistent, I probably would have stopped after the first couple of episodes because it doesn't really pick up until like 3 or 4 episodes in.
Yeah, I sucked you in because I saw you tweeting about various things and like your love of
himbos,
villains. Well, himbos,
villains and himbos,
specifically like captivating villains. And I was like, I have a villain for you. And I was like, I know I'll get you with episode 4. And then you were like, Jesus.
Well, I think it was because I was in the middle of, you know, talking about Maxwell Lorenzano from Wonder Woman 1984. I did a whole video essay on him. And I just love the material for that character. And I was just really big on hyping up how many interesting, varied villains that cinematic universe has managed to put together in just the first few films that it's had. So that was probably why, because I was working on that video for a few months, you know, and I was researching a lot into various things related to Latin America, which is a perfect segue for me to name drop a nonprofit organization that I am going to start putting the link for in the description box of my videos. It's called Global Health Partners, and specifically they focus on offering medical aid and supplies and whatnot to Latin American countries that are being negatively impacted by US imperialism. So just whether it's sanctions, blockades, propaganda, and of course, you know, with the pandemic being so prevalent, there's a lot of things that are needed. So right now, one of the main campaigns that's happening is to raise money for syringes for vaccines in Cuba. And Cuba has one of the best healthcare systems in the entire world. And they have these medical brigades that they constantly send out to the entire world of just countries that need help because they have so many doctors. And they also have a long history since their revolution in 1959 of helping people when there's crises. So like after the Chernobyl disaster, they flew out, I think it was something like 25,000 children between 1990 and 2011 and helped these children that were suffering from the radiation sickness for free because that's just what they do. So right now, you know, they have created 5 different vaccines and making a lot of progress for it, but they have a shortage of syringes. So, you know, they only have about 11.3 million people in Cuba. So it won't take long to vaccinate everyone in Cuba, but they're planning to create 100 million doses and help get those vaccines out to other countries, especially the poorer countries that don't have as much access because certain countries are hoarding vaccines. So, if you would like to donate, I don't care how much you donate. I don't care if it's $1 or whatever your local currency is, but please consider donating because not only do the Cuban people need help so they can get vaccinated, but they're out here doing what needs to be done to help everyone else. But also there are other campaigns to help not only Cuba, but Nicaragua. So there's my little tangent, and now we can get into Vincenzo. I'm so excited. We're only going to be talking about the first 5 episodes because originally we had planned on doing the first 10. And for those who have not, I don't know why you would be watching this if you haven't seen Vincenzo, but if you just want to listen to us talk because you like when we talk, the show is very long. There are 20 episodes in total. Every single episode is an hour or more. Some are like an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
So it's so much happening. There is just event after event after incident after incident and just shenanigans nonstop.
But it's fun and it's wild. And the reason you stick around is it's fucking bananas. Like, oh my God.
I don't even know if we had decided on how we wanted to proceed with going through this because we could do it episodically, but I also think that there are certain things that we can address just with getting into talking about the show because I think what's particularly interesting with Vincenzo as the protagonist, you made a little character sheet, which I think is pretty useful. So that's this guy over here. This is Vincenzo. What's interesting about him as a protagonist is that so he starts off as the consigliere. I don't know Italian. Really sorry to all the Italians if anyone is watching. But he is this higher up person in the Italian mafia because he was adopted to an Italian family and originally from Korea, obviously.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about him is that he really undergoes an interesting transformation and there's some really fascinating ideology that I think is intertwined with it. So I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit in explaining this. So what I found with him getting started is that what he really embodies at the beginning of the show is he represents the alienation of man, this concept, because he's just by himself. He's fleeing from the mafia for reasons we will get into. And he's really just an island. He doesn't really have friends, family, love, whether romantic or platonic. He kind of has a friend, but it's more like a business associate. He doesn't have that type of emotional connection with other people. And it's just this very single-minded pursuit of there's this giant supply of gold and I'm on what is it? I don't know mafia slang. I'm on the run and I need to get this supply of gold. But then what you come to see him do over the course of the series is that he comes to find a community and really form those relationships where at first it's just a means to an end, but then it really is just a genuine care for other people. And also, again, kind of getting ahead of myself, but the whole subplot with the pigeon, I would argue that it has far more depth to it than maybe people realize because his introduction is this really big, bombastic act of violence of setting aflame this...
It's a vineyard. He basically, the opening is...
Yeah.
No.
He burns that. And the thing is that when I was rewatching the show and watching him do that, I was, because when I was first watching the show, I'm just thinking, what is this? What's going on? Oh, this big spectacle that I'm observing. But now watching it, I'm going, hello, climate crisis. Why are you doing that? You could have just K-worded him. You didn't need to do that. You don't know if that fire is going to spread. I started panicking, where with the California wildfires and Turkey's on fire right now, where I'm just like, why are you doing that? But then you have him meet this pigeon in episode 1, once he gets to Korea. And at first he's very kind of hostile of go away, but then he comes to really form this, cute little affection for the pigeon. And I think that it's symbolic of him having like a more, what that represents is having that harmonious relationship with nature and that concern for, you know, nature, where like we're literally in the middle of the climate crisis, where I'm very politically I'm in that headspace right now. I can't not be. So that's what I read out of it with rewatching the first 5 episodes.
I'm not sure they went that deep on that one. The
depth of the author can also be applied to television writing. So this is my analysis of it. So
I like your depth, because I was a lot more shallow. I think for me, like, Vincenzo is Korea's impression of the Korean diaspora, the idea of people who, you know, are Korean but don't know what it means to be Korean. So I think this was their impression of what that character is, like the outsider coming back to the place where they should feel like they belong, but they don't belong. Which I have feelings about, but they're my own feelings.
Part Korean diaspora. So
yeah, and as somebody who grew up in Korea, there are things, because I lived there, just for context for people who don't know, I was born and raised in Seoul. I lived there till I was 18, but I went to school on a military base. So like English is my first language, but I'd also speak Korean. But like, it was interesting to watch this from the perspective that I have as somebody who like lived there till I was 18 and then moved away. There are definitely things that do not track, like Vincenzo being a 7-year-old Korean boy who moved to Italy and is super fucking fluent in Korean when he comes back, but whatever.
Conveniently, his Italian sounds very Korean, but you know.
Like, oh, that's Italian. But it's just funny to me because I'm like, I left Korea when I was 18. My Korean's garbage, and yet Vincenzo is having full-on conversations about law. Amazing. I didn't know he had those conversations when he was 7. But that's neither here nor there. To your point, though, the thing I found interesting about the pilot and the introduction to him, the thing that stood out to me was I was like, the first 15 minutes of that show, when you're in Italy, totally different show than the rest of the show. Because you're right. Yeah. It is so epically like his mafia father, he was the consigliere for, dies, and he has to go get revenge on this like other mafia don, and like the mafia don is racist to him and like a total asshole. And then Vincenzo burns down his vineyard and like walks away and then like flies to Korea because he's got to go get some gold from under this plaza. And it's just such this epic, super dramatic Korean interpretation of what a mafia show should be. And then the second you end up in Korea and you switch to the other lead, Hong Chae-yeon, the tonal shift in the pilot is wild. There she is. There's our girl. Because it goes from being this super serious kind of like Italian mafia drama to like funny sound effects.
That's why, you know, as soon as that started, I
had to tell you to keep going because
I would have stopped. I'm just letting you know. If it was just me browsing of, what's on Netflix, and I had just clicked on it, as soon as, and it's just the very, you know, it's like cartoon sound effects, you know, very Looney Tunes. I'm going, what are you doing? And I would have stopped, but I'm glad that I didn't. And
that's another thing that's wild to me, because like, it's not, I mean, not that all K-dramas are particularly consistent, but those sound effects went away pretty quickly. They didn't use them for very long. So it wasn't even like the sound effects that they used commonly on the show. And I think this is true, not just for K-dramas, but for TV in general. The first few episodes take a beat to figure out what they are and to figure out what their tone is, for the actors to kind of get into what they're doing and to kind of like live in their characters and understand. And like, luckily Vincenzo is like 1,000 hours long. So after a few episodes, it really knows what it is and just like rolls with it. But like, the first 2 episodes are pretty uneven. But I'm glad I told you to stay in, because episode 4, man, once you're in Korea, the tone of the show changes. Do we want to just go into the plot here and go in and like talk about it?
Yeah, we can. I would also just to, you know, anything else that I want to say about the introduction of just the premise or my general takeaway to keep in mind of what my perspective is of the show going forward is that it's very much an anti-capitalist show. Like, I'm very firmly of that belief of, it's just like, what are all of the fundamental evils of capitalist society? All of those things are represented by Babel, which is the main corporate company, and the the main figureheads that you see involved with that company, I think that it's a very clear anti-capitalist, sentiment. And I think that what's very interesting to watch that show is that, because we were talking about Parasite earlier, is that you're really starting to see this up spike in anti-capitalist art. You have people that are in high positions of power in government, but also in show business, I would say more so on the business side of things, that they're the people who have all the interest in keeping capitalism going, but also they're kind of fine with letting artists do what they want, because if the artists make good stories that compel people, then they're going to make money off of it. But also, you're seeing a lot of anti-capitalist art. You're seeing Bong Joon-ho with both Snowpiercer and Parasite, but also this goes beyond just Korean art. You're seeing it in Hollywood, but you're also seeing it in another Netflix series called La Casa de Papel, which is about to have its last batch of episodes airing sometime this year. I don't remember if they announced a release date or not. So I just think it's very interesting that when you have artists, and like the whole job of an artist is to have empathy and to understand people, because you have to be able to create a story in which you're understanding all of these different characters who have different perspectives. So I think the argument can be very much made that when you have that really strong capacity for empathy, the only conclusion you can come to is that capitalism is evil. So on with talking about Vincenzo.
Correct.
I've said so much, so you can jumpstart however you want to.
Well, to your point,
things.
I'm going to suck you into a K-drama hole, I'm telling you right now. The anti-capitalist sentiment is very strong in K-dramas. A lot of the times the whole like corruption goes up to the top and it's all about making profits and money is very, very much a Korean theme. So I'm going to pull you into more. But on the Vincenzo front, so in the pilot, we then meet Hong Chae-young and her dad, Hong Yoo-chan. They are both lawyers. You don't immediately recognize right off the bat those two. They're in a court together, up against each other, and then the thing you realize afterwards,
they look a little bit alike. I mean, at least in these pictures that you did for the character sheet, considering that they're not actually related, that they're just two actors. I mean, compared to other characters, they don't look related, but like, I don't know, maybe it's like the eye sees what it wants to see, but I'm like, I can see it's not that far of a leap, but anyway.
What's funny is just because they're such polar opposite characters, I'm just like,
No, the genetics. I'm talking about their faces on these character sheets.
I just picture her like doing her weird acting thing with her dad and him just being like, I'm done with this shit.
Oh, and that was the other thing with her where I really struggled to get invested in her and to root for her, because they start her at a point, which makes sense because the show is so long that you need to start her at one place so that she can have growth and transformation. But just, I'm assuming this was in the script and also that she was directed to act this way, but she's very... I don't want to call her annoying because I think that there's a sexist tendency of women to be called annoying anytime they're not perfect. But she's overacting a lot.
She's a lot. Like she's playing it very broad.
Yeah.
It's interesting because she tones it down a little bit, but she's still kind of broad. Like she's very much in a comedy. The choices that she makes very clearly show that she's a comedic character. There's a tendency in Korean dramas to like do things with women that involve like romance or sexualization or like damsels in distress. And she's just not that. And she's also not your typical sort of like angry macho character who is just like written like she's in the 90s. There's something that I find refreshing about her where she's like a feminist who is like very driven in what she does. And she's very like smart and sassy, but in a like comedy sort of way, not in she's just slightly a few degrees off of what I would have expected of her character before I saw the show. And the thing that I find refreshing about her is that she can hold her own. You know what I mean? Like she really does do a good job of like just kind of being a combination of like kind of an asshole to the intern character who I love so much, Jung-woo. Like the way her interactions with him are so very just like, you're the annoying little brother and I'm going to treat you as such. There's no like weird love triangle that she's involved in. And in the romance.
Didn't you say that love triangles are common in K-dramas?
K-dramas are famous for love triangles, you know? And like, I just worked on, I worked on Shadow and Bone, and like, there's the whole like, she's torn between these two guys, and of course one turns out to be the bad guy, and then she's like, I can't be with him, but like he was alluring. And like that is very much the typical Korean drama where she would fall in love with two people, but probably the bad guy at first, and then, oh shit, he's the bad guy, what am I going to do? And in this case, that's not at all what happens. The only person that she's interested in throughout the course of the series, and if this is a spoiler to you, I'm sorry, you've never seen television.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert for all 20 episodes. So like,
yeah, like clearly she's going to end up interested in Vincenzo. And the thing that's refreshing to me is the only person she's interested in this whole show is Vincenzo. So it's nice. And even then, their relationship stuff is so secondary to the rest of the plot because she's so much more interested in getting the justice that she wants. I love her character, but I do very much recognize that she is super broad. She knows she's in a comedy, and she is gonna ride that. This is not a grounded performance by any means. It's hilarious because she and her dad are very different dynamics. The actor who plays her dad plays it very grounded.
I love him.
He's fantastic. He's super fucking out of pretty much everyone in the show, the most grounded character is Hong Yu-chan, the moral compass of the show, who is Chae-young's father. And then when you meet him in the pilot, he and his daughter are going against each other in court. She's essentially like working for the asshole law firm that is all of the problems in the world. And he is a public defender who is fighting for the rights of like the common man. And when they meet outside the courtroom, the two of them bang heads. Like she like tries to make him feel like shit, and he tells her she is a shit. And so they have this very contentious relationship. And it's kind of interesting to see. Then you're introduced to one of my favorites, Jun-woo. He is, when you meet him, he is a puppy who is a Korean American speaking that good Konglish, mixture of Korean and English. And he's dopey. He's on a fucking scooter. And he is like Chae-young's intern, and she treats him like a dummy. It's great. He's awkward. Yeah. Did you describe him as a himbo, or was another person that I was talking to that was like consummate himbo?
Well, that's okay. So what's interesting is that, so the whole thing is that Han-seo, these two are brothers. Han-seo starts off pretending that he's the CEO of Babel. In actuality, his older brother is the actual CEO, but I forget because I haven't gotten to the rewatch part where he explains why. But he's hiding. He's sneaking around. So he's pretending to be this lowly intern, but actually he's the CEO and he's the one calling the shots. What's interesting is that for us, because we're rewatching it to be able to talk about it, is to really understand how they're basically trying to pretend to be each other, and it's not just about the superficial. You're pretending to be the CEO, but you're not actually the CEO. Han-seo is trying to be this vicious bully of eat your spicy foods quickly, and that's his version of being a bully. In actuality, Jun-woo, when he wants to be nasty, it's not fun villain shenanigans. It's downright scary stuff that he does. But then he is basically playing his younger brother. I mean, I think he's mimicking who his younger brother actually is, which I would almost argue it could just be coincidental. It could just be the script. But if you think about the real logistics of it, I'm like, do you even know that that's your younger brother's actual personality? Because you never get to see him just like happy and cute and just having a good time because he's always terrified of you. But it could just be scripting. But, it is kind of funny when you actually see who they both really are further into the season. Yeah. That these earlier episodes, they did like a Freaky Friday thing of they really truly did each other.
They truly did. Yeah, the thing that is interesting, so you meet Jun-woo in episode 1, and you think he's this he's got this curly floppy hair that's really cute, and he's just kind of a silly know-nothing who has a clear crush on his, Sunbae Chaeyoung, who's like, you know, treating him kind of like a dummy, but she also like isn't awful to him. She's just like, and there's this amazing flip that happens at the end of episode 4 where you find out that ultimately he's like a fucking sociopath. He's the bad guy. You fall in love with him for the first 4 episodes, and then he turns into the bad guy. And then he's the most compelling, fun bad guy for several episodes. He's fun,
but I lost any regard for him. Like once you get really into the second half of the season,
yes,
like
but the
without
first
giving too many specifics because there's like no time.
But the first few episodes where you find out he's the bad guy and he's like dancing in the hall and stuff, and he's just like, surprise! You're like, why are you so entertaining? I hate that you are so entertaining. Meanwhile, he's also physically abusing his brother, his poor brother, who like initially you're like, when you first meet his brother, which I think is in episode 2, I think you meet him in episode, either at the very end of episode 1 or in episode 2. He's literally this like chairman who's like buttoned up. He has this collared shirt on like this and this crazy tie pin that like feels like a dog collar for very real reasons. And he's just kind of this buttoned up, like, asshole dude. But then as it progresses, you watch him get beat up by his sociopath brother. And you're suddenly like, oh, I'm so sad for you.
Han-seo is my baby. Like, I'm glad that we're both here to represent opposite sides of, because, you know, you're all about Jung-woo. Like, he's your favorite. You think he's so interesting and compelling. And me, I'm like, Han-seo is my baby. I will protect him at all costs.
I'm actually in your camp on this one, because for the first half, I was like, Jung-woo, I was all about him. But then in the second half, I was like, Han-seo is my baby. Like it, and I think
it's not fun anymore. The villain's not fun anymore.
Because the arc of that character is to be fun and compelling, and then the scarier he gets, the more grounded his performance is. So it can't be quite as funny and goofy anymore, because it's less scary if it's too funny. So it just progressively gets more and more like terrifying. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is they did a really interesting character arc with the two of them that I just love, but it's such a long show that I don't think you can ever replicate it in anything else. Like I just don't think you can.
Yeah, I was interested about the way production works on this, because I feel like there's so much that they have to film that I would honestly want to interview someone who works on the show that could explain about, okay, do you have all of the episodes written before you start filming all of them? Or are you like filming earlier episodes while you're still trying to finish writing? Because they set up so many things early on that continue to develop and progress. But also one of the things that I noticed, so that would indicate planning. But one of the things that I also noticed is that in rewatching certain earlier episodes, there are continuity errors where if you really look at it too closely, you're kind of going, okay, well, based on this stuff that you find out in the later episodes, this part doesn't really make sense. But since, if I understand correctly, this was being released on a weekly schedule, so it's not like you're binging all 20 episodes in 2 or 3 days and then noting very quickly certain continuity errors. Because, for example, early on when, oh God, what was it? Jung-woo I'm so bad at remembering everyone's names. He warns Taecyeon about the destruction of
the plan to essentially accidentally hit the plaza so that they'll be forced to demolish it.
Yeah, so he warns her about that. So then she can go and tell Vincenzo, and then Vincenzo decides to like throw the party to stop the destruction of the building. Yeah. But if you really think about it, it's like he's the CEO. Babel is trying to get this building. It doesn't make sense for him to warn her. And, you know, but at that point, you don't know the reveal, and you don't know Babel will go to any lengths to get what they want. So it doesn't really make sense. And also, when you have these earlier conflicts between, I need to scroll down on your character sheet. At the beginning of these first 5 episodes, this guy is presented as being this dangerous kind of criminal, you know, one of those kind of contracted henchmen.
He's a gangpe. Basically, he's like a gangster for hire.
Yeah. So he and all of his, you didn't put all of his secondary person and then all of the other
White
henchmen that are in
Angel.
that group. But
Yeah.
they're set up as this, they're big, bad, scary people trying to come and threaten the people who live in the building, which is basically just, I think, all of these people. And there's more. Is it her who has the son? Yeah, so there's more. It's hard to get everyone onto the character sheet.
It's like 50 characters, man. It's so many characters on this show.
He starts off as kind of this menacing, threatening character, but then he ends up being, not so he ends up being a friend to the group, but that's much later on in the season. But the point that I'm making of how it doesn't really make sense is that, and this is kind of getting into a spoiler, but we won't get too much into it. I'm just talking about how we're talking about the earlier episodes, and it's just interesting to rewatch them and note certain continuity things that don't super line up, is that, so this guy and all of his squad, they're threatening the residents, but then you later find out all of these people can fight. And they're acting scared earlier on. So, I mean, I guess if you want to make the argument of, they find their bravery and their confidence to fight back later on, which, there's like a psychological aspect to, do you feel that fire to be able to stand up for yourself? But like the level of skills that all of these people are revealed to have when it comes to fighting, I'm like, okay, it doesn't really hold up continuity-wise.
Some of them
is a weekly event.
Some of them kind of do. If I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember Miss Kwak, the lady who owns a snack bar who has the kid. I can't remember if she's the boxer or if Miss Jong is the boxer. One of them is boxer. But the way she hits her kid feels very much like they knew she was going to be revealed to be a fighter later. The one that caught me off guard.
Beat him up, and she's like,
yes, she's just like beating him up. The one who caught me off guard was Mr. Taec, the dry cleaner who comes out of fucking nowhere with scissors.
Yeah, that's just later on, but yeah. So that was like, what? That's kind of why I would be interested to find out, if ever there was a way to find out, kind of how the production of the show works, because when you're only, like, as far as we can tell, it's just going to be these episodes. They're not going to try to continue to go on and on and on. No. It's just, this is the event, and it is an event. And because they can just throw it all out right now, it's really more so about that experience of going on that ride as it's being aired week after week after week. And you're just getting increasingly invested, and the stakes are escalating, and you're learning new things as you go on. But it is interesting to think about how, I mean, if you go back and you want to be one of those kind of film Twitter type of people where you're going, well, technically that continuity doesn't really match, but that's not so much a criticism, it's just more an observation, because I do think it's still a fun ride to go on, even when you're rewatching, but yeah.
I'm curious because I don't have all the ins on how Korean television is made. I assume that there are things that are similar to US TV and there are things that are different. I know they have less writers on staff, which blows my mind when it's like your episodes are an hour and a half fucking long, and these are long ass scripts and things are bonkers. I could be wrong, but I think they write this show. They do similar to shows that are kind of on network or on cable where production starts while you're still writing things. I think they break everything before they write. I could be wrong about this. I had talked to somebody who knows about Korean production, and it sounds kind of like you essentially know what is going to approximately happen in all the episodes, and then you write. Sometimes production starts before you finish writing. And then the thing that happens in Korean television that's exactly like the US side of things is that you have to rewrite for production. So there will be things that you'll discover in production, like actors will notice things, actors will have suggestions, like things will be shot a certain way, things won't work. You'll have to make adjustments according to what. So there's a little bit of like, you prepare as much as you can, and then you just rewrite as you go to include more stuff and add more layers. So yeah, I think there is a certain amount of like, they know what they're going to do approximately, and they have certain things set up, but then the rest of it is kind of like, hang on for dear life. The thing about K-drama, especially contemporary K-drama, that is mind-blowing is how quickly they burn through plot. Like, it never like, I'm kind of okay.
There's no filler.
There is, like, and not only that, they want all these unexpected wild turns. So, like, all of the Plaza residents having these, like, wild pasts where they're suddenly all, like, fighters. I kind of love, like, I love that they made the gangster dude, his secret past is he used to be a nurse. Like, so he's like, I'm good at healing. They called me the White Angel. And I'm just like, of course. So that's the sort of thing that I really appreciate, because, like, I didn't see it coming, but I'm okay with it because it's wild and I'm not bored. But yeah, it is interesting. Like, I do want to know more about Korean production just because I'm curious, especially considering, like, you know, I'm on the US side of things. So I'm just like, how does your sausage get made?
Yeah.
I'm very interested. But yeah, this show, the other question that I have for this show is that, so Korean dramas typically are 16 episodes. This show is 20. And I'm like, did you guys know you were going to be 20, or did you get essentially a note as you were going that
it's
they
a
wanted
hit?
more?
Do more.
Yeah, I was like, like, how did this go down? Because it is wild to me that it is 20 episodes long, and that's so long. And again, like, you know, U.S. shows, you get your 22 episode seasons on, like, broadcast, but their shows are not an hour and a half long each. So I'm like, there's so much that happens in this one season. Like, I wrote notes on this show, and the first 4 episodes, it's 17 pages of notes, man. Like, the amount of stuff that happens in this thing is wild. Speaking of, do we want to talk? We should just talk broad strokes about what happens in these episodes.
Yeah, well, with Vincenzo, so, you know, obviously a lot of the earlier, these first 5 episodes, it's focusing on Vincenzo because the show is called Vincenzo. And you're following him through this journey of trying to get the gold more than, I mean, there are other leads, but he's really the main lead. A lot of the villain characters, they start to get more screen time in the episodes, but they don't necessarily have that screen time in this first batch to the same degree. It's a lot more of just setup and introduction. But the thing that is, you know, nice about Vincenzo being Italian Korean is that he gets to wear all these nice suits, and I was going, God, yes, I'm here for that. And also, like, I love how, you know, you have this really strong opening, and then he shows up to Korea and immediately he gets scammed, which, I mean, if we were really trying to be nitpicky brats about it, I was like, I don't think it's realistic that he's this badass mafia with killer instincts. Like, I think he would sense the scam. He lives very quickly.
Italy. He should know not to get in that fucking cab, man. I was like, I literally wrote in my notes, I was like, has he never been to New York? Like, you know, if you live in a metropolitan city where it's like, you want to get in my unmarked cab from the airport, it is a
feels
internet.
Like
don't get in an unmarked cab. If you go to a major city and you're at the airport, do not get in an unmarked cab. Don't do it. Like, fish out of waterness. Because, like, when he lands at the airport and he gets there, one of the first things that, like, I guess a Korean TSA agent or one of the security guards at the airport says to him is, oh, you're a gyopul, which is, like, the Korean word for essentially Korean diaspora. It's, like, not the nicest version of it, but
we have that in Japanese. It's called Nikkei.
Yes. So he very much clearly lets Vincenzo know that he's essentially a foreigner in Korea. And so part of the reason that Vincenzo gets in that cab is that, like, they want the audience to know how unaware of how Korea works this guy is. He gets scammed by these Korean, you know, unmarked cab people. He then has to ride a bus where he is having the worst fucking time and he looks like shit. And then he gets to this plaza.
There are those little aunties who like come over and give him a wipe, because I also feel like, whether intended or not, I think based on what we can surmise and deduce about how production probably went, I think a lot of this stuff is just, you happen to have it work out really well, where I can analyze it in a way where I think it's just one of those things of, like, you didn't plan it, but it works out well. Is that it's kind of that foreshadowing of, he's this badass and he's strong on his own, but you need people to have your back, because these are strangers, you know, they don't know him. And I think it speaks to kind of those types of values of the importance of community, you know, of just how people should just have that inherent goodness within themselves. Of people should help people, you know, of they don't know him. They don't know if he deserved to get into whatever scuffle he got into. Of it, maybe he provoked it, but they're just like,
he's killed people.
Like he, you know, he's going through a rough time. He's got dirt on his face, so she just comes over and gives him a wet wipe, and you know, and I think it's sweet. Yeah.
It is sweet. I like there's and it's interesting because there's a lot in this show. There's not a lot of sweetness in the show, but there are several moments where people are acting kind and just and good. And to me, the thing that's really interesting about the structure of this show is that the real inciting incident doesn't happen until the end of the third episode. The first 3 episodes are very much setting up Vincenzo, his character, what he thinks he wants, and then shit goes down, and then all of that changes. The whole reason he's going to Korea is because
He wants gold.
he wants this gold that's buried under this plaza that he knows about, that this Chinese, like,
Tycoon.
Like, he died, and the only 2 people who know about this are him and Mr. Cho. So he's like, I'm going to go get that gold because nobody else knows it's there, and then I will fucking own an island. It's great. Let's do this. So he goes
Capitalism.
Yes. So he goes to Korea with the express intention of just getting the gold from under this plaza. And the problem is that the gold is literally under a Buddhist monk. Or like a monk, and
by the way, I love this guy. I think he's underrated because he has like no dialogue except but it's so funny. Right? You know, that's one of those things of people don't appreciate that a small part like that, but it's like he's so good. You know, even though he's the one who gets all the dialogue, but he's just so captivating. He just
remember when Vincenzo asks him to lift a butt cheek, like it's and he's so, like, he's so good. So good. So Vincenzo wants all this gold in the plaza under the room that is the Buddhist temple. And so it's like, in order to get to it, he needs to move these monks out. And the problem is that monk that Genevieve and I both love so much is literally sitting on the panel above that he'd have to pull up to get to the safe combination code thing to get down. So
well, and he came up with the plan. The reason why he knows about it is because Mr. Cho worked for this tycoon and they were all there for the meeting where Vincenzo was the one who came up with the whole idea of, okay, so this is how we do it in Italy. You buy an old building and you tear up this, pick one of the rooms, foundation. You tear up the ground, you make the vault down there and you put all the gold in there, and then it's a safe, so you lock it up, and then there's a retinal scan, so only you can open it up. But it's a front, you know, mafia. What is it called? Laundering or whatever. It's that thing where you have a business, but it's a fake business.
Yeah, it's like it's a money laundering thing. Yeah. In this case, it's just
So that's why there are all these people who are in this kind of rundown building, because in order to make it seem legitimate, you have to have these spaces that are rented out by this miscellaneous group of characters who all have different personalities and different, one is like a dance studio. One is, I think there's a couple restaurants.
Teacher,
there's the Buddhist
restaurant,
yeah, so like
laundromat.
Because if a building is abandoned, then presumably there's some company that will, because capitalism, so somebody will probably take that space and try to turn it into whatever, and then it's a lot harder to get access to your gold stash. So you gotta make sure that you control the businesses up top.
The other thing that's tricky is that it's booby trapped. So if anybody tries to force their way into this safe, it is rigged to make the building collapse. So you need to have the retinal scan because it's the only way to get in. Because if you try to take a crowbar to it, the building falls down on you. Yeah. So there's a lot of high stakes in this. So his whole thing is like, he's got to get all of these people in this building to clear out, or at least the people in the temple to clear out, because it's like, what, like $2 billion in gold or something? It is literally, they show it, and it is so many gold bars. And it's like, we need 2 days to get it out. Like, it's so much actual solid gold. There is a gold Buddha that it'll take 2 days of manpower to lift all this shit out of here. And gold bars are heavy. I want to say they're like 60 pounds each. They're really heavy. So yeah, it is, it's wild. And so that's all he wants. Shenanigans go down. He is, of course, trying to organize it so that he can get all these people out. And what ends up happening is one of the people who's at this plaza is Hong Yu-chan, the public defender, who is, again, the moral compass of the show. And so because Babel wants this building, they shenanigans their way into it. And Mr. Cho, who is the technical owner, they like Babel essentially bullies him, kidnaps his family, threatens to kill his family,
Via
and
him.
forces
And his
Mr.
goon
Cho.
squad. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Forces Mr. Cho to sell Babel the building. So now Babel has the building. And then the thing Vincenzo is struggling with is how the fuck do I get this building back now that it's been taken away from me by legal means? And that requires him to team up with Hong Yu-chan. So he and the public defender are suddenly working together to try to get the rights to this building, or to get the like ownership of this building back, so that all of the plaza residents can keep staying there. And he promises all of them, like, I'm not going to kick you out. I'm just going to renovate. All he wants is this gold. All of this is going on. You've got this B storyline with Babel. Evil corporation, perfect example of capitalism and all of its problems. And there is a B storyline involving Babel Pharmaceutical and Chemicals, where they are doing really bad shit. And there are all these researchers and scientists involved that end up getting murdered along the way. And of course, the public defender, the good guy, Hong Yu-chan, is like looking into it and trying to form a case against Babel, the corporation. Meanwhile, his daughter, Hong Cha-young, is working for the evil law firm Woo-sung, who defends
This is the
Babel.
casualty. He's important to bring up now just because he doesn't survive these first 5 episodes.
Murdered in episode
corresponding 3 with Hong Yu-chan about Babel. He's offering to testify, but capitalists will do whatever they have to do to maintain capitalism. So they send people after him to K-word him.
Yes. So once Babel finds out that he is going to essentially make a case against them, the evil lawyers send their henchmen after him and get him murdered. And the thing that I want to talk about this scene real quick. Episode 3. I cannot tell you how impressed I was as a TV writer about how they executed this like last 10 minutes of episode 3 of Vincenzo. You've got 2 scenes that they're intercutting between. Vincenzo and Yu-chan, the public defender, have in the last 3 episodes bonded. And Yu-chan has clearly kind of become an almost father figure to Vincenzo. And Vincenzo is trying to convince Yu-chan, just give up your case against Babel. It's dangerous. You are too good a guy to do this. They are the devil, like they are actual monsters. You are not equipped to fight them. And Yu-chan is just like, I can't not. This is my destiny. And he has this whole speech. Hold on. He has this whole speech in an earlier scene about his feelings. And I'm just going to read this. He just says, as long as I can punish Babel Pharmaceuticals, I can give my life. And Vincenzo asks him, why are you so reckless? And he says, because I was destined for this. Even though I know that the game has been rigged, I must give it all my all to beat them. That's my fate. Smart people may rule the world, but reckless and stubborn people like me protect it. And that's like the entirety of his character. So as Vincenzo and Yu-chan are having this conversation inside this restaurant, they cut over to Min-chul, the researcher, who is in, I think he's in Busan. He's in the south of South Korea, because there's a comment at one point about somebody not having a Busan accent. And people are trying to kill him. Like, people come to his door and he fucking jumps out a window and barefoot runs through the rain and pulls out his phone and tries really hard to call Yu-chan. In that moment that he calls Yu-chan, Yu-chan gets like, he wants to go out to smoke a cigarette. Vincenzo sees the phone, sees that he's getting a call. And then you cut back over to the researcher running, and he cannot get a hold of Yu-chan. And then he gets fucking killed. So then Yu-chan comes in from smoking his cigarette, and he and Vincenzo are talking, and Vincenzo tells him, like, you're still pursuing Babel Pharmaceuticals. I know this because I saw you just get a phone call from your researcher. So then you're watching, and you know this researcher is getting fucking killed. So you see Yu-chan pick up the phone and try to call this guy, and you are very focused on watching Yu-chan on the phone. And what you are not focused on is they're sitting in front of a window, and in the fucking background, a truck comes barreling towards them. And by the time you notice this truck is coming right at them, the truck explodes through the window and runs Vincenzo and Yu-chan over and fucking kills Yu-chan at the end of episode 3. And I just remember having a moment where I was just like, well, clearly they didn't kill Vincenzo. The name of the show is Vincenzo, so his ass is alive. But did they seriously just kill the moral compass of the show? And sure enough, at the beginning of the 4th episode, his ass is dead. And I realized, I was like, that's the inciting incident. Killing the only person who Vincenzo and his own daughter, Taecyeon, recognized was a good person is honestly what kicks off the show. Because at that point, that's when you actually understand the villains are Babel, the corporation, because they literally murdered this man who is trying to do nothing but good. And like, now his daughter, who was working for an evil like law firm, leaves the law firm.
Who works for Babel. Like,
she works,
they represent Babel. So.
Babel was one of her clients, and she quickly realizes they fucking killed my father.
Well, because right after, not only it's really sad when you know, it's one of the nice dramatic moments that they give her to do instead of having her act hysterical and messy. And you called it comedic. I think it's not the best creative choice, but you know, to each their own. But she has that really heartbreaking moment of realizing that it's her father that is dead. And she then sees his name being slandered, because here's the thing, they don't just kill him, they set everything up to try to slander his reputation, to try to pin stuff on him that he didn't do. And she always butt heads with her father, and they have this really funny fight of he's trying to legally disown her even though she's an adult, but okay, you know, it's just very petty, messy family drama, and it's one of
the Korean family registry. It's a very specific Korean thing, but it's ridiculous.
But, you know, with her seeing what's happening, she knows exactly what's going on because of the fact that you've seen her. Her first introduction as a character is her bribing a witness to not testify.
Yeah.
So she has partaken in these ethically dubious things because she was brainwashed by capitalism, because it's all about just success at any cost of, I'm going to be the best lawyer, I'm going to upward mobility myself through this company, and I'm going to win these cases. Whereas her father is all about doing what's right, you know, and fighting the losing battle because it's the right thing to do. So now she can't just see it as like, oh, it's just the job of the case or whatever. Now it's come home to roost. It's her own father who, regardless of the disagreements, obviously she did love her father, and she knows that she just got caught up, as you know, some people do, but now she has to have that kind of crisis of conscience of, oh, right.
And there's some character development stuff that they do with them, because the thing that you learn in the first 3 episodes is obviously they have a very contentious relationship. They're not on good terms. But the thing you learn in episode 3 is part of the reason she's so mad at him, is that he worked while their mom was sick and he wasn't there when she died because he was a lawyer who was constantly busy. And the thing that is implied, because she became a lawyer because she looked up to her dad, like you see photos of her as like a nerdy kid with like a bowl cut and stuff, and she's just like a totally different person than she is in the show. The thing that is implied was that he essentially because he says later on he doesn't want her to become an awful lawyer like he was. The thing that I think they were saying essentially was that he worked for a law firm doing stuff. And the reason he's a public defender now, and his whole thing about it being destiny, is because what he is trying to do now is make up for not being there for his wife stuff. And like, so his daughter is angry at him for this. Like his daughter is angry and doesn't see him trying to repent. All she sees is this guy who refuses to acknowledge that he wasn't there when his wife was dying, and she hasn't forgiven him for that. And when he is killed, because he's killed so unexpectedly, he died right after they had a major fight, and she decided not to apologize, because all good Korean drama is based in regret and revenge. So she has essentially the arc that you kind of expect her dad probably had, where she now, you know, she's seeing the company that she worked for, the people that she covered up things for, now are saying terrible things about her own father, who, regardless of her feelings for him, she knew he was a good man, you know, and he's dead and they murdered him. And she's just like, you have pissed off the wrong bitch. I'm fucking furious. So she takes up the mantle and like joins, you know, Jiparagi Law, his old firm, and like takes over, and she just makes it her goddamn goal to bring down Babel. And she's like, and I'm the one to do it because I represented them and I know where all their bodies are buried. So It's great. It kicks her off on that arc. And again, Vincenzo, you know, like this is a guy who was orphaned and adopted and grew up in a foreign country, and he finally made a connection with a Korean-esque father figure who, by the way, we didn't even bring up his mom.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, because before he gets, you know, K-worded, he's able to have this arc even within these first 3 episodes. Because you might feel like if you're, for some reason, watching this without having seen the episodes, you might be going, so are the first 3 episodes just filler then? No, they're not.
No, they're not. They're
so
good.
There's a lot of important things that are set up, and there's a lot of build-up. The whole season, it's always building. It's always just building and building and building and escalating and escalating and escalating. But there's this arc, this contained arc within these first few episodes between Vincenzo and this newfound father figure, because he happens to be representing Vincenzo's birth mother, who had given him up for adoption.
She gave him up for adoption. You find this out later because she had, was it lung cancer? She had like stage 3 or something cancer, and she thought she was going to die. And she was a single mom who couldn't take care of him. So she essentially took him to a church and put him up for adoption because she thought she was going to die and she didn't know what to do. And then she lived. So she had all of this regret, and she became a cleaning lady. And the reason that she was the reason she's in jail is because her boss sexually assaulted her and she killed him. So when she was put on trial, this is legit. In Korea, there is a horrible stigma in having children out of wedlock. And there's an even worse stigma in putting children up for adoption. So it's like, it's a really complicated scenario, but essentially during her trial, what happened was the district attorney who, you know, was pressing these charges against her brought up that she had a child in wedlock, and also brought up that she was like a woman who put her kid up for adoption because she didn't care about him. And that got to essentially her, you know, her trauma, and she didn't fight. So like she was found guilty, and Chae-young's dad, Yoo-chan, is trying to convince her that she has a case to put up for, you know, requesting a retrial. And she, by
the way, this actress, incredible, stunning work. 11 out of 10. Give her all the trophies. I mean, our trophies superficial, like our accolades a scam.
But give it to her.
Yeah, but also give them to her anyway. Like,
it's great. She is fantastic. And so she is, you know, struggling with this guilt. So she's not even fighting it. Like, she's just like, I deserve to be in prison.
It's a very, like, not to overly homogenize all East Asians, but like as a Japanese person, I definitely recognize the very like East Asian self-flagellation thing in her character, and just like the way she conducts herself. And what was so interesting to me is that in watching that scene where Vincenzo is going to the prison, but he doesn't go inside, he's just kind of there and he's looking, but then he walks off. And the way that it's filmed, I was kind of in my head just going, oh, nice timing of he walks off at the right time for the lawyer to show up, so you don't have to do a scene transition. But then as it turns out, it's deliberate because he did see him there. I mean, he also already knew because he had seen Vincenzo at a trial, so he brings up. I love that reveal as well, where he's just like,
so good.
So why don't you just talk to your mother or whatever? Yeah. And Vincenzo is just kind of like,
how did you know?
He doesn't super over emote, because I guess that's also just like, it's a character thing, but it might also be I think it's a combination of just like, it's the character, it's the personality, but it might also be a cultural thing of, he doesn't super, you know, you don't have the big animated reaction, but he does just kind of, you know, like, oh, he knows.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have feelings about this storyline, but I'm also a parent who has 2 adopted children who is also Korean, and they're Korean Americans. But like, it's so interesting because like so much of this is on a technical standpoint. It's like Yoo-chan had to know, because Vincenzo would never talk about this. Character-wise, it doesn't make sense for his character to ever talk about this. So it was very smart on their part to be like, we need somebody to talk to him about this, otherwise it's never going to come out. So we should just have this guy who we're about to murder in 20 minutes, like, say the thing that we want him to say so that we can get Vincenzo on this rolling ball. Because the other thing that ends up happening is once Yoo-chan is the K word, Vincenzo then realizes like nobody is there to take care of his mom, and nobody's there to defend his mom, and nobody's there to be her attorney. And so he ends up kind of like, he and Chae-young kind of take that responsibility. This mom thread is really interesting because it is a very long arc on that front even. But they do I thought they did a really nice job because of how many episodes they have, doing it in a way that felt kind of authentic. You know what I mean? Like his hesitance in like interacting with her, his hesitance in like talking to her. The first time they talk is in episode 3, but it is a very kind of like, he knows who she is, she doesn't know who he is. And it's a very sort of like, hi, I'm so-and-so. And then Vincenzo's like, I gotta go. And then he leaves because he's uncomfortable. And I just thought it worked really well personally. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the mom is a good actress.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Very good.
I did want to ask you, because I don't really know where to put it in as far as the timeline of trying to fit it into certain specific plot points of discussion, but just in a general sense, did you want to talk about the food? Because this was something that I was messaging you about, how the people on this show, they're always eating. It doesn't matter if they're heroes. It doesn't matter if they're secondary characters. It doesn't matter if they're the villains. They're always eating.
So the thing that you need to know about Koreans is that we fucking love to eat. We love food. It is such a staple in so much storytelling, especially Korean storytelling. And I think a lot of it comes out of like, historically, we had a lot of food scarcity, you know. We had a few wars, we had an occupation, like there were a bunch of things in our past that made it hard to eat. So Koreans love to eat. And we take a genuine pleasure in eating, and we also really like to show affection through food. So it's not uncommon in K-dramas that characters are constantly eating, or they're constantly feeding each other, or they're rewarding each other. The other thing that I absolutely adore, and it doesn't really come up in Vincenzo as much, is like how much we love meat. Like, I'm sorry, vegetarians, but like a legit reward for doing hard work is being promised to go out for like Korean barbecue. And I'm not talking kalbi, I'm talking like samgyeopsal. Like, let's go get some pork belly. You know, it's just like, you're going to pay me in meat, I will do the thing. Like, we are very, very food motivated. So I love how much of Vincenzo there is constant eating. Like, I wrote some stuff down. I think in episode 2, they're all drinking yakurutu. They talk about tteokbokki. They're all drinking makgeolli. Makgeolli is this Korean rice wine that is like, I don't particularly love it, but I mean, if you're into rice wine, it's good stuff. And then like in episode 3, they talk about McDonald's, which was like weird. I was like, oh no, Han-seok is in episode 3. Maybe McDonald's is in 4. Han-seok is actually Chinese food done Korean. So it's Korean Chinese food. It's basically like sweet and sour pork. I used to get it a lot when I was a kid. It's one of my favorites personally. Nowadays you can get Han-seok with rice flour, and it's like mochi flour basically, where it's just like extra springy, and it's just the best. And then my favorite use of food in the first 5 episodes of Vincenzo,
spicy food,
is jjampong. So Koreans have this spicy noodle soup that is jjampong.
Should we explain the setup for it? So Jun-woo gets his fake promotion, because I call it a fake promotion because he's the CEO. So, I mean, you can't really promote him, but under his disguised alias, he gets a fake promotion, and he goes to visit his please be my love interest, you know, Chae-young, but she's just not having it. But then she's like, okay, well, I hope you like whatever the dishes you just said. And he's like, I don't know. And she, you know, berates him for that. And then he's like, oh, okay, like, sorry. And then didn't I send you a picture of Vincenzo when she basically challenges him or whatever of, oh, I guess you don't like spicy, or you can't handle spicy food.
No, but I should make that my background because I cackled. So
here's that I sent it to you. Hold on.
We should describe. Okay, just for those of you who don't know what jjampong is, it is a spicy soup. It's literally red. Like when you look at it, it's red. Not because it's tomatoes. Oh yes, he's dying.
Just his face in that moment of like, you did not just challenge my. Oh no, I did send it to you because I said the fragility of the male ego.
Yes. Okay, I didn't get the photo, but I got that part. I have to go look. It might not have downloaded when I looked at the message. So the
Okay,
first time Jampong comes up in this episode, though, is not with Jun-woo, it's with Jang Han-seo. So the two brothers, you got your evil brother, real evil brother, who's secretly acting like a cute, like, puppy dog. And then you've got your brother who's the puppet, who is just not actually nearly as mean. Like, literally, Chung Jung-woo beats up his brother with a fucking hockey stick and puck. Like, he shoots pucks at him. And then, like, another time he tries to choke him with a towel. He's real bad, guys. He's real bad. So his brother, who is the fake CEO, chairman of this company, decides he has to punish the board. And the way he thinks he should punish the board is he makes the entire board eat this spicy jampong, and he won't let any of them drink.
Quickly.
He's like, eat it quickly, and you don't get any water. So everybody is sniffling.
That's his version of bullying. He's trying to play his brother, and
his version of hurting people is making them eat spicy food. Like, that
quickly.
is his that is his definition of how you hurt someone.
And that's why he's my baby, and I will protect him at all costs.
That gives you an example of how, at his core, he's not a bad person. He's bad at it. He's just bad at being bad. So then his brother calls and, like, mocks him and is like, are you making them eat jampong? Are you stupid? What the fuck? So then he mocks him because he's straight up like, you can eat spicy food. Who gives a shit about that? And you don't realize it's foreshadowing to the moment you were talking about, where he goes and he tells Chae-young, I got this promotion. And she's like, sure, cool. How about I treat you to dinner? I want to get jampong. And he's like, I don't want that. And she's like, too fucking bad. That's all I want to eat. You going to eat it or not? And he's like, fine. Vincenzo says, I don't want it. And she says, probably too spicy for you anyway. And that's when the male fragility comes in. And this is why I love this scene. You have three characters. You have a Korean, you have a Korean Italian, and a Korean American, all talking about who can handle spicy food.
And she's eating it unbothered, and they're suffering.
Yes, she's just, like, not saying anything. And these two
she's just
Korean
that watching. Like,
yeah, she's just like, the two Korean diaspora are having a passive-aggressive fight about how much spicy food they can handle. And she just, like, grabs more spice and, like, pours more chili oil in both their soups because they're both like, this is good. It's not spicy at all. And she's like, cool. Doop, boop. And they're just eating it up and in so much pain. And it's the funniest thing in the entire world to me because I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, this is what Koreans think about non-Koreans. They think that like Korean diaspora can't handle spice the way they can. And to a certain extent, I don't think they're wrong because even though I grew up in Korea, the level of spice my mom can handle versus what I can handle is very different. Like, I love spice. My mom will eat something so spicy that it literally hurts my tongue. I remember eating some salsa that she made that I couldn't taste for hours after I had a few bites of it. Like, my tongue was swollen. It was too much for me. And I was like, that was a mistake.
Well, and see, wait till Koreans in Korea find out that white people exist.
Oh,
if they thought this was funny.
Dude, when I hear that pepper is too much, I just get mad. Like, I get so mad because I'm just like, no. It is wild to me. So much of Korean food isn't necessarily spicy, but there's a little bit of spice. We love pepper. We love, and I don't mean black pepper. I mean red pepper. We love red pepper. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but, like, I'm always amazed that when I go out to eat Korean food with white people, it's like, they're like, I want that kalbi, and that's about all I can handle. And I'm just like, I want to eat anything other than short ribs, man. I want to eat some spicy stuff. Like, I'm not a huge fan of jampong myself, just because I think it's good, but I think after a while it tastes like the same thing. And, like, I made tteokbokki the other day. I know I have to make it at varying levels depending on who I'm serving it to, where it's like, this one's not too spicy, don't worry. And I'm just like, make my nose run, please. I do think, take the spice portion out of it, I think that coming to the States, like, has weirdly made me want stronger flavor. And I don't know, because it's definitely not because of American cooking, But I don't know if it's because like I miss eating Korean food so much that the few times that I eat it, like American food has blown out my palate, so that when I eat Korean food, I want like a heightened, more flavorful version of it. Because I know that sometimes when I cook Korean food and my mom tastes it, she's just like, Jesus, why is it so strong? And I'm just like, is it strong? And then I'll taste her version of it, and I'm just like, this is really mild. And I don't know if it's just because like my palate's all fucked, but like, yeah, it's been an interesting experience moving to the States, because like when I go back to Korea, I do notice like a difference in the flavor of the food that I'm eating in comparison to the flavor of the food I'm cooking. But yeah, that's totally off topic. Koreans love food, man. And we love our food in particular. There's like, and that's something that's delightful about Vincenzo. Like as it goes further on, they seem to have this like thing where they'll be like, in this episode, we're going to feature this food. And in this episode, we're going to feature this food. And I'm just all about it.
You know, it was funny. I was thinking about how when you were quoting the lawyer character who dies in episode 3.
Oh yeah, Yu-chan.
When you were talking about some of the stuff he was saying about how he's willing to put his life on the line, you know, in order to do what's right, and that he's like not afraid of death, basically, is paraphrasing what he's saying. It's just the timing of us talking about this show is so interesting, just because I was reading about Che Guevara and just, you know, just the parallels of that kind of, I'm going to do what's right, and I'm not afraid to stand up to the big bad imperialists, the big bad capitalists, because it's the right thing to do. And it's just so funny because I was watching this interview clip of Che Guevara in Ireland, and he was asked, there were some attempts to kill him, and you know, this Irish journalist who's asking this question to him is just like, oh yeah, you know, it seems like he lives a very dangerous life, you know, is he not worried about that? To condense what his answer was, where he's talking about, oh, well, you know, when these people like, you know, that they're trying to kill me and they're failing to kill me. And he calls it una payasada, which basically what it means is he's saying the clownery.
But then they die.
Yeah, but you see what happened?
Yes.
The amount of people worldwide who got inspired by Che Guevara to fight the fight against capitalism. And this guy does the same thing in this story. You have these people who are so principled and so firm in their beliefs and their convictions about doing the right thing, regardless of the fact that it is an uphill battle and that it's really scary. Because the thing is I see people like that and I'm going, I don't know how they're like that, because it is scary to think about pushing as hard as people like that do. It's really, really devastating and sad that he becomes a casualty of this battle. But then what happens? His death is this catalyst of people feeling, you know, galvanized to take up the fight.
Well, it's interesting because like I remember reading some discussions from, maybe it was the writer of Vincenzo, talking a little bit about the concept of the character Vincenzo, because the thing that Hong Yu-chan says to Vincenzo is essentially that he can't be the one who does it. Like, his character is so pure and so true in what's right and wrong that he recognizes himself that he's probably not going to be the person to bring this corporation down, because he doesn't have it in him. And like a thing that he actually says to Vincenzo, notes, he's like, it takes a devil to drive out another devil. Only monsters can beat monsters, and he's not a monster, but he really wishes a real monster would show up and deal with these evil men, whether it's legal or not. And so it's interesting because like the thing about Vincenzo that, you know, the creatives behind it recognized is that Vincenzo as a character is not inherently good. Like, he is kind of a symbol of a gray character, which is, from what they're saying, like, is kind of what it takes to actually make change. Like, to actually fight against a system that is broken like this requires, to a certain extent, somebody who is willing to be Batman.
We don't need to get too much into this right now because it's stuff that happens in later episodes. But
Yeah.
I do think that purely because of the episode count, I think that Vincenzo does not end things or end certain people as quickly or as efficiently as he should have. They try to justify it of like, oh, well, he likes to play with his food, basically, is what they're saying.
He's a cat who plays with his food.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, fair enough, but also it's just, you have an episode count. If he really wanted to end this, he could have already, but you have an episode count, so it's going to keep going.
Once you know the players, it's like, how long are you really willing to play this game and risk people? Like, that's
exactly however many episodes we have left is exactly what they're going to do. So
yes. The problem with shows that burn through plot like this is sometimes you run out of plot.
Yeah, like how many times can he almost K-word Jung-woo?
How many times can he like be like, I could have K-worded you, but
and then he just doesn't, and it's like, I mean, okay, we don't need to overly discuss it because we're focusing on episodes 1 through 5, but the water bottle incident enrages me. I'm not looking forward to rewatching it.
Save it.
I was like, really? You're an idiot. You're an idiot. And that's all I have to say on that for the time being.
Speaking of villains, though, we should talk about the villain lawyers because we have not. And I love Jeon Yeo-been so much. Okay, listen. If you're going to be a villain, she is so good. She is incredible. And like the other villain, Mr. Han, he's also good, but he's kind of like, he's a little less dynamic. He's a lot less dynamic. I mean,
you know what's interesting? They kind of do a similar thing. So you have these two brothers who are playing each other at the beginning. And then what you end up having with these two is that you start them off of one place of, so he is the one who meets with her and he says, hey, come work for us. And so initially she comes and she's going to work for them. So he has a certain level of seniority within this company, but her having the level of savvy and cunning that she does, eventually, you know, once all the players and the moving parts start to reveal themselves, or at least reveal themselves to these two lawyers, she kind of becomes the more dominant presence, and she's more so calling certain shots. And I don't know, I mean, she's definitely like, they give her more to chew on as a character and as an actor, but I think that, you know, it's important for him to be there because it offers that opportunity to kind of evolve and shift the dynamic and show that difference and kind of the power dynamics of how it moves. And also because of the fact that you have two characters on this side of these two brothers, then you're able to have them kind of have their own little factions of, okay, so, you know, who starts to align with who, without getting into too many specifics, because we'll talk about it when it comes up in the further episodes down the line. So I do want to give him his credit too, of like, it's good that he's there. And I think he's kind of funny because he's kind of a doofus, but not a total but you know, he's just, it's kind of like, how did you get to this seniority position? But there's commentary in that. So
I mean, he's the guy who fails up, right? Like he's very good at operating behind the scenes, getting behind. He essentially is the guy who like picks the winning horse and like, you know, hitches his wagon to him. Like that's what he does. He's not a person who's very good at confrontation. He's a person who would rather like fly under the radar unless he's getting credit for doing things well. Like he is a more indirect opponent.
Yeah.
She, on the other hand, will fuck you up to your face. And I love her so much.
She meets Han-seo exactly one time and she immediately is like, that's not the CEO.
Yes. She reads him down immediately. And like, I wanna read a little like thing that the actress Kim Yeo-jin said about her character, because like I love this. So of the characters I've played until now, this was the hardest one to approach. It was a villain I had never seen anywhere else. It's hard to call her a villainess. She's genderless, not feminine nor masculine, like a middle-aged woman at times and like a middle-aged man at others. While acting, I focused on the fact that she had to be despicable. In many words, a villainess is sexy and captivating, or a certain incident or accident that causes her to carry out her evil deeds is portrayed so that viewers can empathize with her. But for Myung-hee, all of these were stripped away, and I had to show a balance between her mundanity and her evilness. Like, she's just this mundane, evil, like, woman. And one thing that I thought was interesting was that she says that like you can't really empathize with her, but the thing that I actually found very empathetic is they were very clear in the fact that this is a woman who had to deal with sexism constantly. Because when she was at the prosecutor's office, the men in that office
were set her up. That's why she was willing to jump ship.
Yes, they were like setting her up. They were making her do the dirty work. And so like she switches over to this other office where there's another woman in a position of power and they're immediately set up against each other. And like the men are constantly like looking down at her. There's an interesting thing that happens in the show that you would only pick up if you understand Korean. And that's that this character speaks with a dialect, like she has a satori. So it was interesting when I was watching it because I immediately picked up on it. I was like, she's not from Seoul. There is a specific like accent that she has. And there are times where it's much stronger than others. And the thing that the actress said about it was that she doesn't use the dialect when speaking to Jun-woo because essentially, like, as you learn later on in the show, he is both her boss and to a certain extent, the person she sees as an equal. Like she has respect for him. So she speaks to him in a more Seoul accent that is a little more proper. But she spoke with a stronger accent when addressing characters she looked down on or wanted to fight. And I fucking loved it. Because like with Taecyeon in particular, there's one point where she in episode 4 goes to their law offices and she's talking to Vincenzo and she's talking to Taecyeon and she's trying to get Vincenzo to speak so that she can hear his voice. And she is just speaking with the thickest like dialect accent. She is just satorying it up. And it is so clear that she is trying to throw them off their game and like get at them and get them to respond to her, and they just don't. And like I'm watching it, I'm like, this is so satisfying for me because like I know Korean and I recognize this stuff, but I'm sad that viewers like miss out on this. It's just like a brilliant acting choice. And it was a choice made by the actress because it wasn't written into the script that she would have this accent. She chose to do this, which I thought was a really interesting choice for the character. I really loved it. Because the other thing that I thought it did is it did a really good job of like, you know, Vincenzo to a certain extent is an outsider. Well, he's very much an outsider. Jung-woo is like kind of an outsider. We can get into his Americanness and how it's all bullshit in a second because it's such bullshit. But like, she also is kind of an outsider. She's not from Seoul. Everybody else in this show speaks with a Seoul accent, and she doesn't. So she's from the South, and it's like, yeah, it's fascinating. It was a really good choice, I thought. It kind of did a lot for her character, and I was really into it.
I don't think that in the script they give you enough information about her to ever truly get a sense of why she does the things that she does or why she is the way that she is. I do think that if there was time or if they had the motivation or the desire to explain it, I do feel like they could have put information in to contextualize what motivates her. I think that regardless, it's a compelling performance and character to watch over the course of the series and just what they do with her. But also, you know, as someone who has studied psychology, I mean, I would have liked if they had given just those few little bits of trivia to kind of contextualize why she is the way that she is and what motivates her, especially without getting into too many specifics of just kind of how her, you know, once she gets to meet the real CEO of Babel and kind of how that relationship evolves and just her willingness to just do so much for him.
I mean, she murders people in the first 3 episodes. She gets her crystal balls to go out and fucking murder people. Here's the thing. I see where you're coming from. And normally I would agree because I'm very much a writer who's just like, what's the source of their damage? I want to fucking know. But there's something about her character that is so unapologetically like, this is who I am. Like some people are just this. And like, you don't get an explanation for why they're fucking awful people. They just are. And part of me kind of lives for it, where I'm just like, she's just a shit human being. I think I've heard of the reason I love that she doesn't have too much of a background is like the more they went into Chung Jung-woo's like background, the more I was like, this is falling apart for me. Like, just because like his whole like serial killer teenage background, I was just like, also, that means he lived in the US for like 3 years. Like this whole like Korean American thing that they're doing with him is like not the same. Like although some of it I'm positive is an act, because like at the very beginning of the show, there are times where he does like, I can identify so much, where they're like, somebody will say a word and he's like, what does that word mean? And it's very clear, like, Korean's my second language. But then they're like, P.S. he went to the U.S. for college, and that's it. It's like, what? Oh, and he went to the U.S. because he murdered people. Maybe I didn't need to know about his past as much. Maybe it was more compelling when it was a mystery.
Well, I think that's also a thing of because they have 80 million things that they're doing at once. Just like the things that I pointed out with the continuity.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have the time to micromanage perfectly planning out the logistics to make sure that they neatly land.
The diaspora thing, I think actually, like, it doesn't make sense if he's being honest. It makes sense if he's playing a character, which I think is probably what I don't know if they intentionally did this or if it's just a retroactive like explanation of it. But like the version of his character, because I don't know how far ahead they were in scripts. I don't know if things were rewritten further down the line. The version of his character that is a true like Korean American, like Korean second language speaking person is not the version of him that lived in Korea till he was 18 and went to college in the US. You know what I mean? Like that's inaccurate. But if he was putting on a character for Taecyeon and he was trying to pretend to be somebody he wasn't, in that instance it totally works. Because then it's all bullshit and it's all fake and he's bullshit. Vincenzo, on the other hand, should not speak Korean as well as he speaks Korean. But it's television.
I mean, Italy, like, okay, to be fair, I've never been to Italy, but just in having talked to different people who have gone, and Italy is one of those places where, you know, there are people who speak English, yes, but then it's not even about English, it's about Korean. And I'm going, how many people in Italy speak Korean? You don't have the opportunity to practice your Korean.
He's not speaking it with anybody. Later on, he talks about his parents were white, and he was picked on for being the only Asian kid, so he was constantly dealing with racists who wanted to beat him up, and that's the whole reason he got into the mafia. And it's just like, then who the fuck were you speaking Korean to? Like, what? Now, granted, there could be Korean mafia, but like, again, he left when he was 7, and I don't know what conversations he was having when he was 7, but his vocabulary is incredible, you know? Like,
yeah, I've had to explain that to people where it's like, okay, so when I was little, I spoke Japanese and then I spoke English. But if I were to try to have a conversation with a Japanese person about politics, oh my God, I don't know any of that vocabulary.
I can't. And not only that, like and then you can get into the varying levels. Like, my Korean is bad when I speak it. My understanding of it is substantially better than my ability to speak it because I left when I was 18. So the conversations I was having were 18-year-old kid conversations, not about politics, not about law. So there's a lot of vocabulary I'm missing. But also, I'm 40 now. I don't use Korean on a regular basis. When I go back to Korea, it comes back to me, but I got to practice it. I have this whole thing where it's like if I start speaking Korean and I haven't spoken it for a while, it's like my tongue feels heavy. It's like my tongue doesn't want to adhere or make the shapes that it's supposed to make in order to speak the language. And then on top of that, you know, like when you get out of it, like the translation process is a completely, like the way you translate it in your head and the way you speak it is like a taxing thing. But I can sit here and watch a Korean drama and understand probably about 80% of what is being said and then like stitch it all together using context clues. So like, yeah, like the thing that blows my mind about Vincenzo is just like, where the fuck did you learn Korean? I wish I had your skills, sir.
Yeah, and also because he's set up to be this very cool, almost a mystical level of cool, of just everyone is so perpetually under his spell, even if they're an enemy, where they're just so impressed by him. And if you're trying to be cool in a language that you don't use on a regular basis, you're not going to come across as cool. You're going to be fumbling and struggling. And, you know, so that's one of those things of, it's not so much me criticizing the show. It's just more so us discussing the subject matter. And
it's
just
funny
because it's
I'm
interesting
sure
to us.
it's like none of this matters because it's like it's entertainment. Just fucking
Yeah,
run
of
with it.
course.
But every time he reads legal documents in Korean, I'm just like, how? He is reading a full-on
Oh yeah,
brief
because
in
reading and
Korean.
writing is another matter entirely. He didn't go to school in Korea. I don't even know if he would know how to read it.
He maybe learned how to do a little bit, but then he never fucking used any of that. Dude, yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, we can pick it apart. It's an entertaining show. It is a Korean show. Of course, it's gonna speak Korean. But yeah, there were just times like as a Korean American who like is so woefully bad at Korean in a way that she is so sad. I just watch him and I'm like, fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I could speak like that. So yeah, it is I mean, I love this show. It is ridiculous on so many levels. Why am I criticizing his Korean when in Jagi is a character? Like, the pigeon, like, who am I to be getting critical about his ability to speak Korean when we've got pigeon heroes in this show? I love it.
I'm just realizing now that there are certain characters that we just have not even gotten to that I feel like we should. Like, for example, somebody who, when they were first introduced, I didn't think I would end up being such a fan of, but this guy, oh my God.
Oh no, Agent On!
He is such a you know what's so funny with him is that, because here's the thing, when he gets set up, you think he's going to be a foe of Vincenzo because he's an agent and he's very, and he specifically is like in charge of the Italian department of kind of security and kind of monitoring the ongoings related to Italian things. And I feel like this is the most excitement he's ever had because I guess Italian mafia are not really trying to do business in Korea. So finally he's like what?
He's like the one person in that department. And like, why would Italian mafia ever come to Korea? So his job is the most boring.
When he first gets introduced and he really wants to go after Vincenzo, he doesn't care that his boss says no. He's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just do this mission that nobody is allowing me to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. But within 5 seconds, he's just immediately enamored with Vincenzo. And it's like, no, you're not even a foe. This is what I'm talking about where, you know, they keep introducing these people like this guy where you think he's going to be a foe. I don't know how many episodes it takes, but after a few episodes, not a foe anymore.
Dude, Vincenzo, literally, they get into a fight at the end of the first episode. Vincenzo takes a fucking rope, wraps it around his hand, throws him out a window, and hangs him out the window by a fucking cord around his wrist. And that's their meet cute.
We think that he's a foil, and then he ends up, fast forward a few episodes, not a foil anymore. And then this guy, I mean, the turnaround on him is about 5 minutes because you think he's a foe, and then very quickly he's just like, oh, Vincenzo is actually, he's, you know, trying to get the youth on track, and he is repenting for his sins and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, maybe he just has never like had any missions, so he doesn't even consider the possibility.
I don't think he's had a mission. Have you seen the movie Frighteners? It's like the Michael J. Fox horror movie about ghosts from like the early 2000s or late 90s.
If I have, I don't remember it. So
there is a real intense FBI agent in that movie who is just real intense. And the vibe I got from Agent On initially was that guy. I was completely convinced he was going to like go to the ends of the world to like trap Vincenzo and bring him in. And then
that's
like,
a very Hollywood thing is there's usually some sort of either a criminal or someone who is wrongly accused of being a criminal. And then there's some sort of cop figure. And I mean cop in the broad sense of any department, any organization, you know, some type of cop figure that's just relentlessly pursuing them to the very end. And very quickly they're like, nope, that's not who he is.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing. Because even in his setup, the reason I got that vibe was because of the first like 2 episodes with him. Like once he knows that Vincenzo's in Korea, and he's like, this guy who is has got mafia ties is here, and his boss is like, I don't give a shit. What are the actual odds that he has mafia ties? Like they're very loose ties. No, mafia doesn't come to Korea. They don't give a shit about Korea. And he's just asking for a little bit of money to do this op, and his boss is like, no. And then he literally goes into his own bank account and is like, I can fund my own op to go check out this guy and then bring him in. So like his intensity for wanting, and then he goes to the plaza, meets Vincenzo, pretends to be like somebody he's not, and then he goes to the Italian restaurant, asks Chef Toto to like make him his
Chef Toto too.
Chef Toto. He asked Chef Toto to make him his like apprentice, all so he can like
That's
spy on
speech he
Vincenzo.
gives, which also this actor who plays Chef Toto also needs some awards because he's so funny. He plays it at exactly the right spot because it's not too cartoony. Like there's an earnestness of like his desperation to try to get people to believe what he's doing, and he so like desperately wants this approval of just to be a decent chef. So you know, it's this heartbreaking thing of when this agent comes in and is finally giving him some validation. And, you know, he's like using the honorifics, which I couldn't, because I don't know Korean. So, but the way the subtitles were written, because, you know, subtitles can be a little dodgy when it's involving languages that do not resemble English as closely in the grammatical structure. But I was just kind of like, oh, I see what he's using, some sort of honorific. And that's why he's so... And yeah, it was so funny. It's
hilarious because Chef Toto looks like a Korean stereotype of Italians, where it's just like,
no, who he looks like. I've told you this before, but I'm going to say it for the recording. He looks like Philip Kirkorov. That's who he looks like, which just blew my mind. When I first watched this show, I was like, why is Philip Kirkorov on a Korean show? And then my second thought was, do these people know who Philip Kirkorov is? And that's why they're just modeling him. And it turns out if a Korean tries to do a bad caricature appearance of Italians, they look like Philip Kirkorov. That's, for those who don't know, Philip Kirkorov is this really flamboyant Russian pop star. And if you're asking me why I know who that is, I follow Eastern European pop. So I know who Philip Kirkorov is. And if any of you have seen the Netflix movie that Will Ferrell did, and Dan Stevens does that really camp character, he modeled his performance after Philip Kirkorov.
I love Eurovision so much. I watched that movie with my husband in Korea last year at the height of the pandemic while we were there to adopt our second child. And that movie brought us so much joy.
Point being, Chef Toto looks like Philip Kirkorov, and if you don't know who Philip Kirkorov is, he's got some bops. So,
Chef Toto also has some bops. Vincenzo treats him terrioply.
That was honestly because I'm too much of a sensitive baby that, like, if you're too mean for no, in my opinion, if you're being mean for no good reason, then, and the thing is like, I'm meant to be invested in Vincenzo as a character, and when he just kept being, I remember I messaged you, I was like, why does he keep pecking on the chef?
How else are we gonna learn if not through shame?
Yeah, and as soon as you use the word shame, and I was like, oh yeah. We should probably jump back into any last things we want to say about Vincenzo, because there are so many characters, and I mean, I think we covered a lot of the main points. I do want to note, because we didn't really get a chance to touch on it, and since I made sure that you added him to the character sheet, so this guy, I love the scene where Vincenzo and his new father figure go into the office, and you kind of get the opposing dynamics, but they're also really synchronized of, so you have this lawyer who he's a public defender, he's very morally upstanding, he's the moral compass, but he's seeing Vincenzo in action of, yeah, no, I'm not really filing the papers, I just did that to get you in the room. And then he threatens him, he's like, I'm gonna do, what does he say, like buy one get one free of the wine or whatever, like you would be fertilizer or whatever. And the fact that in this situation, you know, even though he's very about like the morally upstanding way to do things, in this situation, he kind of gets to see of, okay, this is an extreme case situation, you know, it's fine because they're not playing by the rules. So Vincenzo's not going to play by the rules either, because they were the one who set the precedent. So it's like, if you're going to, you know, make that the way that this game is played, then Vincenzo's going to do what he wants to do. And I love that because I think when I first watched that scene, I wasn't sure if when they left the meeting, if he was going to kind of scold Vincenzo of this isn't the way to do things. But he was super into it. He was like, oh, I love how you said buy one, get one free, you know?
Well, Hong Yoo-chan is just like, he has this moment where he clearly sees, he's like, I would never have done that way. And you got shit done. Like, we got into his office, you scared him, and we got the thing we needed. This is more effective than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
They're tactics that he's just not used to. And so, yeah, it's like you said, like their opposing dynamic is amazing because like he is able to provide Vincenzo with a moral compass that Vincenzo hasn't had because of his dealings with the mafia. And then because of his dealings with the mafia, you know, like the public defender, you know, he's just like, oh, wait, this is how you get shit done. It never even occurred to me to do this stuff. Oh, this is really effective. This is good. Maybe I should do more of this. So yeah, it is very good. I love them. I love this show.
Yeah. And he's not hurting innocent people. He's not threatening and blackmailing innocent people.
No.
They're the ones doing that. So he's just flipping it on them of like, you do this to those people, so now it's being done unto you.
And on top of that, like we were saying earlier, there's like this thing that I think he recognizes in this moment where it's like when you operate within the system and you actually abide by the rules, what happens is the people who are operating within that same system who don't abide by the rules, like get further. Like they outplay you in a way that because you're not breaking the rules the same way they do, like it's harder to work around. And so it feels like
literally something that gets studied in IO psychology, which is industrial organization psychology. It's basically like the psychology of business and the workplace. And it's been studied and written about at length. And this exact dynamic is, you know, I was just talking about this in my my video essay about Maxwell Lorenzano of, you know, when you have that very capitalistic, you know, success first and ethics second. But the thing is that dynamic exists where just, you know, you don't necessarily create a system for a company where you're trying to promote bad behavior, but it's just there are always going to be people who try to game a system. And, you know, and that's a problem. And when the problem happens, you need to kind of be aware of it and try to put things into place to curb that behavior. So,
well, I think that's the question, right? How are you trying to game the system? For what for? Because I think that, like, speaking, you know, bringing it back to Vincenzo games the system. It's just his intentions are different. Like he's gaming the system for good, which is something that, you know,
well, at first it's self-serving because he wants the gold, but then he kind of starts to get more and more personally invested in it.
I can't wait till we get to the episode where they actually get into the vault. That whole sequence with the fucking eye thing is so good. But I will save that for later.
Well, yeah, in the next episode that we're gonna do, episode 6, because when before you decided, because it was so funny when you messaged me and you said, should we maybe not do 10 episodes all in one go? And I was like, oh, perfect, because I'm trying to, you know, in one day finish the rest of the 10 episodes rewatching, and then I didn't have to, but I had already started on episode 6, which is the next one, and I won't get into specifics because we'll do that later. But that whole trial sequence is
so good.
Yeah,
so good.
It's always just so much going on. Is there anything else we need to get into before we? Two-part question for stuff that has not been addressed yet. Did you want to talk about the reveal to the audience of the bad guy, and did you want to talk about the hair?
Yes, let's do that. And then it's 10:30. I should go to sleep.
Yeah.
Yes, I did, because we didn't really get too much into the reveal, which actually comes after like this. The thing we didn't talk about is actually episode 4 in general, because Vincenzo. So after the death of Hong Yoo-chan, Vincenzo and Taecyeon end up teaming up together because they both want to get revenge for this man being murdered. But the thing that also ends up happening is Taecyeon is dealing with feelings of rage that she feels because her dad was murdered. And the thing that she knows that they have access to is the guy who hit her dad. there's an incredible like prison scene, and maybe we should talk about that next time because I want to get to the explosion. But basically the two of them come together, and the thing that Chae-young realizes is like she wants to get revenge without killing people, because killing people, it makes her feel worse than she expected. So they blow up a factory. They blow up essentially this like drug processing factory to like stop this drug from getting out that will turn Korea into the US and make people addicted to painkillers, which, congratulations, America. That's what people think of us for good reason. And in doing so, once they blow up that facility, then you have the fake chairman, Jung Han-seo, come out.
Just scared herself. Get a little cameo.
Oh, look how pretty. Hi, Kimiko. Oh.
Little paper scraps. Okay. Anyway,
so pretty.
Your point about the building being exploded.
So this building explodes, and Jung Han-seo. This is all episode 4. Yeah, we never go into episode 5. So I love how we divide it, and we never go into 5. So Jung-woo then shows up in the way that you hate. He comes out, curly hair first. And you're like, I already know who that dummy is. Me, on the other hand, I fucking lived. Because when I watched it and I saw that curly hair, I didn't need a slow pan from his feet to his head. I was in it. I was like, wait, is that the hair of the himbo that I love so dearly? Oh no! Why is he suddenly so scary? And
for people who need an explanation, Christina and I have talked about this scene multiple times, and usually it doesn't end up on the internet. But we are both in opposite camps, because I disagree with the directorial choice to have it be an out of focus shot that slowly becomes in focus. I think he like moves forward, like, less obscured. And I would have done a pan up, start from like, feet or ankles or whatever, and like reveal that way. Christina loves that because the hair, there's only one person with that ridiculous hairstyle. So it can't be anyone else. She lives for it.
I do.
But again, we both love the show, so I don't want anyone thinking that I'm like, oh, and that's when the show was ruined of this one directorial choice. It's just artists talking about art.
It's so funny because like both of us love the reveal in general. It's just how we would have gone about it is slightly different.
Yeah.
But the reveal itself is wild because he did such a good job of making you fully believe that this guy is a stupid like sidekick pining for Chae-young, and it turns out that he's the goddamn puppet master. And in my rewatch, what was interesting is now that I know he was the bad guy, all of his moves actually felt kind of like they were intentional.
Except for warning her.
Well, no, I actually think the reason he warned her, because like when I was watching that episode, I think the reason he warned her was because he knew she was concerned about her dad. So he was willing to fuck it up to get her dad out of there because he was in the building. And he was essentially, because everybody was trying to get her dad to pull out and not have a conversation about it. So if I remember correctly, he did it for a personal reason. And then all along the way, he keeps trying to pull her away from this. And he keeps trying to get her to not go after Babel. And he keeps trying to like gently guide her in a different direction, and she just keeps fucking refusing, and it's all because he just loves her so much.
I don't think he has the capacity for that. Like,
I agree.
Really. I think he's attracted. I think he's intrigued. I think he
thinks he loves her. I think he loves her as much as he's capable.
But it's just once they really take the mask off and they're interacting with each other, I just think that it's not played in a way where there's any demonstration of that he's capable of that. So.
Well, the one thing that they do consistently and all the way through the end is he genuinely tries not to hurt her, but then there gets to a point where he has to, and even then he kind of hesitates for a moment. He has to. He's the bad guy. He doesn't have to do shit. But like, he's a bad guy, but he thinks he's in love with her. And so it's interesting on the rewatch knowing that, because there are times where he makes these looks at her, he makes these looks at Vincenzo, where it's just like, now that I know who he is, those read way more sinister. But like, yeah, I thought that reveal was, I went on Twitter and I tweeted about it because I was so fucking blown away because I did not see it coming. I was like, I'm a goddamn TV writer and I didn't see the end of 3 coming. I didn't see the end of 4 coming. That is so rare for me. I was just like, I'm fully into this show.
Was there something else about his hair though?
Oh yeah, so I pulled up something that the actor Taecyeon, who is a former current K-pop star, because 2PM had a comeback.
Didn't you send me a video of him getting like suggestively hit on by a person wearing a horse mask?
Oh, that was a GIF. I also sent you the music video he was in, where he is now, his boy band has become a man band. It's quite the video. He is very attractive. That's all I'm going to say. So he had a whole thing because the curly hair was actually a choice on his part. He said, after the reality is revealed, Chang Jung-woo's presence alone is a strong enough character, but I wanted to give him an unpredictable unexpectedness from the beginning in terms of visuals. Basically, he's a sociopath with an ambition to dominate Korea, whose hair makes him look a little bit like a crazy villain. But also, Taecyeon wanted an external transformation that would convey the feeling of a less grown-up adult, particular to the character Jun-woo, who was taught to pay close attention to details since a young age. A weird translation of that. But essentially what that was saying was part of the reason he picked that hair is it's disarmingly like childish. Like it gives the impression of the himbo character that he wanted to portray. And then there's also an external sort of arc. Like, spoiler alert, later in this series, he gets his hair straightened. So, like, there is
and they literally show you.
Yes! He gets his hair did. Like, he sits in a chair and they fucking straighten it. Yeah. So, like, he has a full arc where he goes from being this character who is visually and performance-wise unassuming to a fucking nightmare serial killer who is still hot. He is very attractive.
Oh, I just noticed because I was skimming through some of the stuff in episode 5 because you were pointing, oh my god, we didn't talk about episode 5. 2 things. One, the forehead thing. That's one thing. The other thing is Vincenzo sticks up for the Mr. Toto's restaurant.
Oh yeah. Pay for your food.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how Chef Toto is just kind of like, it's not that much. It's actually this much. And then he like gives him the money. And then also I think a really important part of that scene is the fact that Vincenzo pays like a bunch of extra money for the dishes. Because I think that's the sign of the character growth of him becoming more emotionally open and connecting, of that community.
Yes, he gives back.
Yes.
He gives back. Yeah, episode 5 is interesting in that, like, so by episode 5, almost everybody knows what's going on. Like, Vincenzo knows that Han-seo is not the real chairman.
Because he has an encounter with him at the gym.
He has an encounter with him at the gym where Han-seo is too stupid. Like, I should say stupid. He's just not smart. Like, he means well. He's the best boy. He's the goodest puppy.
He's trying his best.
He's doing everything he can. He's just not there. And then, like, both, the lawyers, like Chen Han, figure out. I like
that parallel that they both only need to meet him once, and they go,
yes,
not you.
They like figure out, like everybody kind of figures out what's going on. The one missing piece is like, who is the actual chairman of Babel? And so the one thing that Vincenzo and Chae-young don't know is that it's Jun-woo, which they don't know for a few more episodes.
And so he has like a different name, I think.
So. Yeah, it's. I can't remember. Yeah, because he does have 2 names. Because there's one name that's essentially hidden, and then the other name, which is the one he goes by. And I think the reason he goes by the fake name is to, and then he consistent. It's weird because he also has the same last name. Not that it's not that uncommon a name. Chung is a very common last name, but it's also just, there's a little bit of a like, it's not that surprising, is it? They have the same last name. Like, it's not like he went as far as to change his last name. But yeah, so the table is set so everybody kind of knows. And by the end of 5, when they're about to go into trial, it is like fucking game on between, you know, Miss Che and like Chaeyoung. They are going to trial versus each other. There's like the last scene is like they eye fuck each other, and Chaeyoung is just like, because she's comedic. While Miss Che is just like, I hate you and I hope you die. It's great. Also, there's one point where Vincenzo, like the plaza all helps them get ready. Like the laundromat, like dry cleans his suit correctly this time. And like Chef Toto's mom makes them food.
Question about that. Didn't you get the sense that it might have actually been him, but he just said that it was his mother so that Vincenzo wouldn't just like automatically pretend to hate it because he has a vendetta against him? Because the assistant, the secret agent, he kind of makes a comment of like, oh, see, he liked your food. And he's like, shh.
Yeah.
So I was like,
I totally... but he says it's from Mama's culinary, like home culinary school. So cute. But he makes some Korean food that's good, and he eats it. He doesn't spit it out. He actually eats the whole thing. And then they need a ride, and Vincenzo's like, I have a car. Like, he stashed a car in Korea. And what is it? A fucking Lamborghini. So they shoved to this courthouse in a goddamn Lambo, and I'm just like, of course they did.
I can't remember if it was in episode 5 or episode 6 because they have some parts of it, the end and the beginning, that overlap that they re-show. But I do like how there's this one part where Chaeyoung, she kind of does this goofy little thing, and then Jung-woo laughs because that's when he's still a fun villain. Because even though there's mess happening that is negatively impacting his plan, because they haven't escalated him to the point where you can't enjoy his shenanigans anymore, he kind of enjoys the mess and the drama. And that's why he's still a fun villain.
One of the cutest moments is when he like forces his brother to call, you know, attorney Han and give him a promotion. And then he gets the promotion and he just dances in the hallway. Like, it's so cute. And then like, you're 1,000% correct. I really think it's around the time that he like kills a bunch of people in front of his brother that the shit turns. Like, that scene, I was like coming back from that, but like it's still cute right now. And then that Jampong scene happened like after we knew he was the villain. Yeah, I really like this show.
Yeah, there's so many things happening, and it honestly feels impossible to
cover it all.
To get to everything, because I feel like really early on you don't even fully get the extent of how bad this villain is, because they do show you things that when you see in the context of the larger season, you're going, oh yeah, see, that's part of that. But you don't get the full scope of just how awful he is. Even just the way he mistreats his brother. I don't think you really get how horrible he is to his brother until that one,
like that right there. Like, you start to get it, but the brutality of it really escalates in a grounded way, if that makes sense. Because like the first time you see him beat up his brother, he's in a hockey mask, so you don't actually see him. So there's like a bit of a disconnect between what is happening and what you're seeing. And then again, you love the character so much that like when he's awful, it's kind of like moments, but then it gets to a point where he starts killing people, and it's less like you just can't, like, everything feels more grounded. And there's like an act of violence against his brother in a later episode that is a massive turning point for Han-seo, like where he recognizes he needs to make moves that like when I watched it, I was like, how the fuck did they shoot that? Like, basically gets a thing thrown in his face, and it's like the camera is directly on him, and it's just like bam, and the way that it hits him is so
maybe
rough.
it's a prop, and then they just they got to swap the sound to make it sound like a really like.
It just felt like, I was just like, God, it feels like that impact is real. Like, it just. Yeah, the choices that they made in that episode with the way that they shot it is just, I just remember that when I saw it, I was like, whoa!
Yeah. Well, and I think also what's interesting is you see, like, over the course of the 5 episodes, when they start to get more into we got to confront Babel and we got to take them down. Again, it goes back to that thing of it's an anti-capitalist show because they very clearly lay out one thing after another. We have corrupt doctors that are not doing what you're supposed to do in the field of medicine, which is help sick people. They're paid off, so they're in it for money. And then you have the news media, so like this corrupt corporation controls the news media, so they print what they want them to print.
They pay for so much advertising that they are their number one client, so they do what they want, or else they'll pull the advertising and then they'll lose revenue.
I mean, you see those compilations on Twitter of Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post, and now there's all these Washington Post articles of like, actually, the billionaire space run is great. Imagine how tired I am. Imagine how tired I am. And then also the other one is corrupt lawyers. So
where
the lawyers that are meant to be representing these people that have been victimized by Babel, but he's not actually in it to help them. He's on Babel's payroll, so he's basically, you know, there to. So it really speaks to that whole thing of that's what capitalism is you have this select group of people who are so high up that they use their money and their power to infiltrate so many different things to maintain their position.
And it continues. Like, I think that's one of the things that I thought was interesting and compelling, because like there are a lot of K-dramas that go into the evil ecosystem of like police corruption, TV corruption, the news corruption, and all of that. But Vincenzo does it in such a engaging way. The way that they like show the moves that Babel makes, like the way they try to buy people off, the way that they do it is so, I mean, some of it's a little wild and over the top, but it's interesting and it's compelling and it tells the story.
It's accurate. When you actually start to find out what actually happens in real life, completely. Like I think it's accurate.
Completely. And that's the thing. It's just the way they do it is very entertaining to watch, you know, where I'm like, I'm not bored watching this.
Because it's interesting because they'll usually start off with, okay, we'll pay you. And it's like, if you're willing, it's like, okay, now we're gonna blackmail, threaten you. And eventually, like,
well, later on
saying no, then it's
later on they offer them property. They're just like, we'll give you entire floors of this tower we're building, where we will buy you off by giving you and like Korea, property is super fucking expensive, so it is a huge buy-off. We'll get into this in another episode, but like the way they construct kind of like their story about how corrupt the system is, I was actually very impressed, because again, like there are other K-dramas that I've watched where I'm not necessarily nearly as interested, and it feels a little like you're just going to be expositive about this and tell me what's going on. But the way that this show does it, they're so good with exposition that I'm just like into it. They do stuff via PowerPoint. Like they tell how Babel has broken the system in a shitty PowerPoint. Like part of the comedy is in how ugly this PowerPoint presentation is and how bad the photo of the like corrupt lawyer is. It's hilarious. So they do it in a very entertaining way that I really love. And it is almost 11 p.m. So we should The one thing we didn't talk about that we have to talk about next time is the truck barreling at that laundromat and Attorney Che. We'll talk about that next time. Like
the fake out, you know, and the whole thing of like, like, oh, I can't speak right now. Oh, I don't have a voice. Well, because that's one of those things of like, because the way these episodes are written and they're so plot dense, because we're not doing every recording session, we just talk about one episode. We're not going to be able to get to everything, but in just a general sense, the other thing that I would note is that I think it's really interesting how all the supporting characters over the course of the series, they get a lot more material and development. They get their moments and their arcs where they're not just kind of there as decoration or there to service other people's stories. You do actually get to get in there with them on an individual basis, which I thought was so refreshing, because I'm so used to kind of these big shows where you know who the main players are, and that's really who you're invested in, and everybody else is kind of utility only. But you
Yeah.
do really get more in there with them. And I don't know if that's a Korean thing or if that's a Vincenzo thing or both. But like, I just felt like that was something that I really came to appreciate over the, when you really finish the season. Cause like,
Yeah.
they're not just there to be a litmus test for, is Vincenzo more emotionally open now? Like, you do get to have more connection to them, because it's not just they're only there if Vincenzo's interacting with them. You do get to see how they're thinking and how they're feeling. Like, do I trust this new guy Vincenzo? Is he really here to help us? And you get these little glimpses into who they are. I mean, yes, they're always secondary characters, but I've found that to be refreshing. So
I completely agree. Like, each one of them got good material to work with and got a bit of a spotlight at times. And like, I mean, there were some that I didn't expect much out of, like the Miri, the piano teacher. She has a great arc. Like, I didn't expect that to happen, and they gave her a really fun arc with her character and took it in very unexpected directions. And I really enjoyed that. And I don't know if that's a product of the fact that they had 20 episodes to fill. I was like, of course.
it could be, but we'll never know unless we get these people. Maybe that's your next move that you need to make as like a big industry person, is you need to start getting connected in the Korean industry.
Oh my
But
God.
honestly, like, and I'm not even just saying this as a self-indulgent thing of, oh yeah, let's get the inside scoop on the Korean dramas. But I think that with a company like Netflix, where they are thinking about things so globally, I think that it's totally within the realm of possibility of you to pitch. Like, I know you're busy. We've just had a private conversation that will not be included in this YouTube upload about things that you're trying to do and work on. But if you were to try to create a show where part of it is done with people who are not speaking Korean, and then another part of it where people are speaking Korean, and you kind of have that intersectionality, and then you could have a broader global team of people working together on a project. I think that would be really interesting. I think it would be something new. And old Hollywood studios are not doing stuff like that. They're this is where we are. This is the market we're first and foremost appealing to. They don't think about things like that. So, just saying, if you want to, and also the added bonus of you pitching an idea of that, besides just your own creative fulfillment and your own personal, like, as a Korean diaspora, of that type of thing. So now that I have these connections in the Korean industry, I have questions about Vincenzo.
Oh my God. What's funny is I know people at Studio Dragon, so I could ask questions, but I don't, because I don't want to be that person.
No, ask. You never know unless you ask.
You know what I want to put out into the universe? I would like to write something that I could cast him in, just because because he wasn't just in this. I've seen him in other K-dramas back in the day, like Dream High, and like he's a really good actor, but also like he's very funny. He's really funny.
So you want to give him comedy to play?
One day it would be nice to write something that I could cast him in, that he could just like shine in English and Korean. That would be the dream. But
did I not just tell you to do a thing involving English?
I know.
Christina, I'm available to be a PA. Like, hello.
I have 2 kids and I gotta do my job first. But all right, let's wrap this up because I gotta go to bed.
Yes. So thanks everyone for watching. If you've made it this far, those were some of our thoughts on Vincenzo episodes 1 through 5. We will be doing the rest of the season, 5 episodes per upload. It's clearly a struggle. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past you to be like, can we like make it less episodes per thing? Because once we get into these later episodes, there's even more stuff to talk about, and everything just gets so dramatic. And this was a lot easier to do, and it was like 3 hours of us talking, but like this was a lot easier to do because a lot of it was just setup.
I know.
It gets way more eventful later. The trial, we could just talk about the trial for like an hour, and that's like 20 minutes of episode 6.
I know. All right, well, we'll figure it out.